We'll get 2 recordings. For sure we'll get 1. Do I need to break it?
It's just nice and loud right into the microphone.
There we go.
There we go.
Can you all hear me now? Oh, good. All right. Well, I'm excited to share my story with you. I've shared it many places in the U.S., around the world, but now I get to share it at home. So I'm going to start with, and I should say, Father Thomas asked me to share my story, so I didn't volunteer this, but he asked me to. So I'm going to start with just a quick review of the foundation of the church. The unmercenary Orthodox physicians, of course, St. Luke is our first one, we know. But the women, I loved learning about the women, and I went over that last week, and I won't go into it much this week. But Saints 𝕮𝖊𝖈𝖊, 𝕮𝖍𝖊𝖗, and 𝕮𝖊𝖈𝖊. Mothers of the church, physicians of the church, and the reason that I mentioned them, they had the concept of whole person. Body, soul, with the spirit brings about healing. And that's what I experienced in my own life, so my own story is a testament to the foundation of the church, the scripture, and what Jesus did for us. And this season where we are moving toward resurrection. He wants to bring resurrection in all of our lives, and he did that for me. So the unmercenary physicians, and I mentioned that with that book that I brought last week, was by Archbishop 𝕮𝖊𝖈𝖊, abbot of Canadian Orthodox Monastery of All Saints of North America. And he'd done quite a bit of study into the first women physicians of the church and how they brought it all together, the whole person, the body, and the soul. So I'm going to speed on through. Well, I should tell you, though, they had good pedigrees. Zenaida and Philonella were cousins of St. Paul and sisters of Bishop Jason. And 𝕮𝖊𝖈𝖊, I had to look that one up, and I almost forgot. Daughter of Deacon Philip from Acts 6. Famous women, but we haven't heard much about them. But redemption, healing, it's whole person salvation means healing. And that's what Christ has bought for us, and that's what he wants to do for us during this time as we prepare for Resurrection Day. But he doesn't heal just one part, and that's my story. He didn't heal just one part of me. He healed the whole person, body and soul. And Isaiah 61, 1-3, I'm not standing in front of that, is the scripture that I've gone back to for years and years. That he came to heal the brokenhearted, to bring freedom to the captives, to release us from dark prisons of our soul and our body, and to comfort those who mourn, and to give us a crown of beauty instead of ashes, instead of mourning, a garment of praise, instead of a spirit of despair. So this is my story a long, long time ago, on the 4th of July. Pause. We've got one more coming. Out of all of these, we'll get one for sure.
Oh, just do yours. Okay, go ahead.
It was the 4th of July, many years ago, and I was house sitting for some friends of our family. It was 3 in the morning, and I woke up cold. We were near the ocean, and it gets cold at night. I wonder why I'm so cold. And the door, I looked up, and the door to the patio was open. So I thought, I'm going to get up and get that closed. And I rolled over, and I saw a young man crouched in the corner of my room. It was not my room, I was house sitting, but the room I was staying in. And instead of getting up and running out, because the door was open and he could have run straight out, he jumped up, ran over, pulled out a pipe from his pants, and said, "Now you're dead." And he proceeded to do his best to kill me. Pardon me, but I have allergies. It's allergy season. So I may have to keep drinking water. So he ran over and began beating me over the head with this pipe. And it was a pipe that young people, I learned from the detective, use to smoke dope. It's a piece of plumbing from under the sink, has a little bowl at the end. And that's what he used to begin beating me over the head. And he kept yelling, "Now you're dead." So he told me his goal was to kill me. And eventually, the pipe flew out of our hands. I rolled off the bed onto the floor. And that's when he choked me. And I left my body. I felt my spirit kind of pop out. And it seemed like it was traveling very, very quickly through a very black area, but it was comforting. I saw some little lights that seemed to be twinkling in the distance. And all of a sudden, I was back in my body, but not where I'd left it. I was outside at the end of the dog run, hanging on the fence with my arms and screaming for help. So begins the story of what God did for me through all of this. So it seemed, things happened fast. It seemed like a short period of time, and yet it seemed like an eternity that I went through all of that. So now I'm going to unpack the story and tell you what happened, my injuries, and what God did for me. So the scripture that I love, he was pierced for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities, punished that brought us peace. The peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. There I was. That was me a couple days after the attack. I had no whites hardly in my eyes. Part of my scalp had been torn off at the top of my head. The detective found it in the bedroom laying by the door where I had fallen. I had a scar down, you can see it down the side of my face. All of this is a testament to the healing. It's obviously there no more. None of the effects of the injuries are seen today. But my worst injury was to my right hand because I had put it up on the top of my head to protect myself, and not even realizing it was there. And when I got to the hospital, my ring finger was hanging by a tiny little piece of skin. Thanks be to God, it was still there because they were able to attach it. But my hand was split open. Deep down inside, I could look inside my hand and see deep inside. And these two knuckles were gone. Here they are. I'll tell you about that in a little bit. They were gone. They were reduced to powder and bone fragments, so I had no knuckles. It just so happened that the top hand surgeon of Orange County, California, was there at the hospital. Excuse me, pardon me, I have to just keep drinking water. It's allergy season, right? The top hand surgeon of Orange County was there, just happened to be in the hospital, and worked on my hand. He worked on it for hours, came back and said, "You'll never use your hand again. It's so destroyed. You'll be handicapped for the rest of your life." And I was alive, but I didn't feel very alive. So I'm going to show you, this is what I looked like before the attack. I had been Miss Tacoma, and now I look pretty bad. So I look like that. So I'll go back to the scripture. I want to tell you what a miracle that night was. The detective found the drawer for the desk. I was in one of the young men, they had two teenagers in one of the boys' rooms, and he had a desk in there, and I had fallen not far from that desk onto the floor. And the detective found bloody fingerprints that had crawled across the desk drawer and stopped centimeters before a hunting knife. Had he grabbed that hunting knife, I would not be here. That's how close I got to not being here. But I was pretty close to not being here anyway. So that I want to talk about next. What in the world happened? The mystery. If I were writing a book, and I've put this story in abbreviated form in most of my books, but if I were writing a book just about this would be chapter 2 or 3, the mystery. He rescues us from great danger of death, and he continues to arrest us rescue us to this day. 2 Corinthians 1:10. Move over. Like that. I was in the way. So where does God want to bring life to you? Where does he want to rescue you? I don't want this just to be about me. So I want to bring you in. Where does he want to rescue you? So here's the crime scene. You can't see too well, but there's a bloody spot on the door there, and there's the detective took this of different parts of the room. That's where I had fallen, by the door. Where I left my body was there on the floor by the door. And the detective said to me, okay, so we found a puddle of blood by the door. We found part of your scalp. We found blood, a puddle of blood out by the fence and at the end of the dog run. And there was the house. And how, he said, did you get out of the room all the way across the patio and all the way down that dog run with no blood drops at all? Because head wounds bleed very profusely. How did you get there? I have no idea. I don't even know how I got back in my body. I was on my way home. And I had said at that moment, Father, receive me into your hands. I knew this was the end. I knew I was leaving. I was not coming back. So it was quite a while. It was years that puzzled me. How did I get there? What did happen? What went on that night? I have no idea. But one night I had a dream. And in my dream, I saw Jesus walk into the room and pick up a lifeless body and do CPR. He blew across my nose and mouth, and it was his breath of life. Donna did this picture for me. She has all my PowerPoints. The miracle. I told this story on the 𝕮𝖊𝖈 show, and he said, well, when I told him that dream, he said, that sounds good enough for me. It's the only explanation I have. But it sounds good enough for me. I saw him in my dream carry me outside and prop me up at the end of the dog run, where a neighbor heard me screaming. Actually, it was a neighbor whose son was involved in the whole deal that night, not the one who attacked me. He was in another part of the house stealing booze and, not drugs, booze and money. This was a nice family in Orange County. So, a miracle. That was a miracle. That I was still alive was a miracle. But I want to go back. I'll keep the slide up for healing of my soul, but I want to go back to my hand, because here's the second miracle. Months after the attack, I had gone to see the hand surgeon, and he said, your hand is in such bad shape, I can't even go in and put in plastic knuckles. You're just really, really in bad shape. Well, I could see I was in bad shape. I had this weird little cast that they built. They had to build it. It was very, very weird. I looked very weird. I looked like I was from outer space during those strange months of my life. But they had to build and mold this thing, and then it had a little stand and a round circle, and these fingers hung by a rubber band, but it was removable. And so I could take it off. And when I would take it off, this is the ugliest hand I'd ever seen in my life. It didn't even look like a hand. It looked like a big blob. It would shake. I would have to put it back in the cast right away. There was no hope. I would go to physical therapy and just trying to move my finger about 1/4 of an inch. The pain was so great, I would feel like I was going to lose my lunch. So I was getting nowhere, absolutely nowhere. And I went home that day from the doctor's office, and I was very, very discouraged when he said, there's nothing we can do for you. I don't know what to do. It looks like you're going to be like this for the rest of your life. And I remembered the scripture, it says, hope deferred makes the heart sick, and my heart was really, really sick. And I said, Lord, if I'm to be handicapped, if that's part of your plan, I'll accept it. I sure don't want that. But if healing is a part of your plan for me, I would love to know if that's what you plan to do. But I just can't live in this unknowing. It's so difficult. Would you just talk to me in some way about this? Just speak to me. What do you want to do? What is your plan for me? 5 the next morning, I was awakened to an audible voice in my room. The sweetest voice I've ever heard. Said, Cherie, I want you to look at your hand. And my cast was off, and I was doing this. I could barely even do this before. And my hand was moving as though nothing had ever happened to it. And she said audibly, I called this an angel, it had to be an angel, a messenger from God. And she said, you are going to go back to where you were before this moment, but you will get better and better and better and better until one day your hand will be completely whole. And you will write all those books you were told in a dream. I was told in a dream that I would write so many books I would forget how many I'd written. That hasn't happened yet, so there must be some more. I've written 35 books. There must be more on their way, because I haven't forgotten. But that's at the time when this happened, I had not written one book. And it seemed utterly impossible. But when the angel, I'm going to call it an angel, said that to me, I had more hope than I'd had since the moment of the attack. That something was going to happen, and it certainly did. And I did get better and better and better every single day until I went back to the doctor and said, I took the cast off and said, look at this. And here's this guy his jaw drops open, and he says, I don't believe in miracles, but you're about the closest thing I've ever seen to one in my life. And I said, this is all to God's glory. He healed me. He didn't say another word. To God be all the glory. And I've told this story, I've told my story so many places because I've said, God, I want to bring you glory through this. This was such a hideous thing that happened. Although much worse things have happened to other people. I don't want to ever claim that I've had the worst stuff happen, because there have been horrible things that have happened to people. But wherever I tell my story, I always say I only tell this to give you hope that God can do anything, no matter what we face. God can do anything. So I'm moving on now to the part about the soul. Where does your soul need healing? Where did my soul need healing? I needed a lot of healing, not just in body, but in soul. So I want to go back. What I discovered through that whole event, and I've heard many people say this now, the emotional pain of that event hooked up to a lot of emotional pain from the past. It kind of was like a big tsunami that rolled into my soul, where I felt like I could hardly breathe, like I could hardly function in life. And I realized I had enough wherewithal to realize this isn't just this moment, but it's hooked up with a lot of stuff from the past. My mother, who died when I was 6 years old of breast cancer. My grandfather lived with my maternal grandparents, and Grandpa John died when I was 9, and my father had a tragedy when I was 13, terrible tragedy, and on it went. There were a lot of tragedies in our family and a lot of things that happened. But many times it isn't just the large things, the big things that happen. It can be the small things too, and it all builds up and adds up, and one pain connects to another, and suddenly we're overwhelmed with emotional issues. And that's when God began to heal my soul. As I cried out for healing of soul, as well as healing of body. And I met 3 lovely Lutheran ladies. I called them my kitchen angels, who prayed for me around the kitchen table as I began to cry my tears and purge my soul through, what was it mostly? Forgiveness. Forgiveness. Father John talked about that a couple Sundays ago. It's so, so important, the forgiveness of even myself. Even that night of being in that house, my best friend had said to me, Cherie, I don't think you're supposed to go back there tonight. I don't have a good feeling about this. Being young, I was very young, single. Oh, I'll be fine. Nothing will happen to me. Sure, that's the attitude when you're young. Everything's going to be fine. I should have listened, right? I had to forgive myself for not listening, because my friend was certainly getting something intuitively or spiritually in her spirit that I should not have gone. So many, many points of forgiveness I needed along the way. Forgiving even my mother for dying. I can't say it was her fault, but I still needed to forgive her. And a 6-year-old mind doesn't know why your mom left anyway, right? We don't know. So I needed to forgive. Many, many letters and prayers of forgiveness I needed. But as I did that, I got better and better and better emotionally. Part of what I experienced was terror at night. There were weeks until I gotten some help from a psychiatrist where I didn't sleep at all, not 1 week, all night long. I would just kind of prop myself up in bed, and I would close one eye and then I'd close the other. My eyes would sting and burn, and I'd put my head on a Bible, and I would try everything on earth, and I had every light in the room on, 6 lights were on in the room, and I still couldn't sleep, and I was totally terrorized all the time. I never felt safe. I never felt at peace. I could not relax. I could not sleep. My life was filled with fear and terror all of the time. I could only sleep for a little tiny bit during the day if somebody was home, and daytime seemed safer. So I really needed a lot of healing so I could even just sleep at night. But to tell you how bad it was 11 or 12 years later, and I was doing QVC. I don't know, as some of you know, I was the other spokesperson for the George Foreman Girls. And I worked with George. I did the infomercials with him, and I did QVC, and I demonstrated the girls. And my other second home, I called it, was Philadelphia, where I went for QVC. And I had to stay in, and I was married by then, and I had to stay in the hotel room by myself, and any place that was strange and I was alone was terrifying to me. So the only way I could go to sleep, and this seemed normal to me, and now it seems absolutely cuckoo bird crazy, I would stack every movable piece of furniture in that room that I could find up against the door, and I would build a tower. And at the top, I would put the wastebasket. And in my warped mind, I thought, okay, if somebody's going to break in, the wastebasket will fall off first. It will alert me. It'll make a noise. I'll call the front desk. I'll get security up here, and I'll have a chance to survive. And I did that for several years, every month, sometimes several times a month. It was exhausting, because in the morning, I'd have to be down there early for the shows. I'd have to take all that down and put it back. It was totally exhausting. But I kept praying for healing, kept praying for healing. For a while it seemed normal, but then it seemed abnormal, doing all of this crazy stuff, these crazy antics. And I kept praying for healing. And one night I got into that room, and it was especially late. Flying back then wasn't nearly as bad as now, but it was bad at times. And I was late, and I was tired. And I looked at that door, and I looked at the room, and I thought, nah, I'm too tired. I'm not stacking this stuff up. And I started praying and calling for the angels to come and protect me, and thanking God for his protection. And I said, you know what, Cherie, we're going to live without fear from this moment on. And I did. From that moment on, I chose to live without fear. And I only say that because we might have minor things, major things we deal with, but we can choose. There comes a moment in time, like Father John teaches so much, where we can let go. we can just let it go and say, I'm going to live without this, whatever it is that we're dealing with. I also needed exorcism. This is going way back to the beginning after the attack. I was really attacked by demonic forces in the night. Things I would see, smell, touch, that literal. When something that horrible happens and that demonically driven, there are demons involved with that. There were demons involved with that young man. And I needed exorcism, I needed deliverance, and that was part of my healing. So I never want to leave that out. Certainly Jesus set examples for that, and of delivering people from demonic forces that came against them or over them or whatever you want, however you want to describe it. I remember the night when I was hopeless, terrified, exhausted, and I thought, this is my moment in time. I was sitting in the corner rocking back and forth, thinking I could go into a catatonic state, I could go deep inside and never come back out, but it would be peaceful. But I remembered Psych 101, a professor saying, when people go into a catatonic state, it's really hard to get them out. And I thought, well, maybe I shouldn't do that today. Maybe I just won't do that today. But I heard like an inner voice saying, Cherie, just hang on one more day. Just hold on one more day. And every day I held on one more day. And each day got better. That's how Christ heals us so often. It isn't instant. My hand even was not instant. It was just better and better and better and better. And my soul better and better and better and better. There is the word for healing that in the Greek is used in the Bible in a number of places, means 𝕮𝖊𝖈, or 𝕮𝖊𝖈 means to get better and better and better with care. That's often how Christ heals us. We get better and better and better with care. Care of our soul, care of our body, care of our total being. The church is a big part of that. Prayer is a big part of that. Confession, forgiveness. It all fits together. And I was a prisoner and he set me free. So now I want to talk about forgiveness, and the perpetrator went free. There was an opportunity, a big one, to forgive. So it turned out that the three teenage boys, and they had a handprint on the door, of the sliding door of the master bedroom where I wasn't, and they traced that to the kid next door. I knew the family next door to this family that I was house sitting for, and they were all friends of cousins of mine. And so I knew it wasn't the one next door that had attacked me, but it was a gang of three that the detective said ran together in that area, that neighborhood, and they'd been in a lot of trouble before. They'd gotten into all sorts of problems. And the one that I described as attacking me, he knew it was one of this three. But his dad turned out to be the assistant DA of Orange County. And 2 days before the trial, they took the case away from, it went to San Diego to the Attorney General's office, and they took it away from the trial lawyer that was assigned to my case and gave it to a woman who'd only done one trial in her life. She was corporate fraud. I got corporate fraud. And I felt so sorry for her. My cousin and his wife had a huge, beautiful Orange County home. It was a 5-bedroom home, and my cousin's wife invited her to stay at our house. She arrived with tons of papers and tears in her eyes. She literally was crying, and she stayed up the entire night. She did her best to prepare, but she was not well prepared. Of course, they'd only given her this 2 days before, and she didn't even do trials like this. So it also turned out that his lawyer was the husband of the judge. Interesting, should have recused herself, but didn't. So anyway, it was too many shadows of doubt created, and it ended in a hung jury. And I didn't get justice in the courtroom. I got justice with God because he began to teach me about letting go and forgiveness. It was the path to healing of my soul. Letting go. Lots of things in life aren't fair, right? Lots of things that happen to us aren't fair, and there isn't justice that we can see. But it's okay. Because God knows everything. He's our healer. He's the restorer of our soul. Whatever it is, we can just let it go, because in that is healing and freedom. In that is our freedom. In that was my freedom, just forgiving and letting go. Forgiveness is the path to healing. And I forgave in stages. I think I've got an onion here somewhere. I guess not. I thought I had an onion. Oh, there it is. It's like that onion, and we've heard that analogy over and over again. The peeling of the onion, but it truly is. I could say over and over, oh yeah, I forgive this guy, I forgive him. It was just words, but it came with little bit of my soul. You know when deep in your heart, deep in your soul, you really are forgiving somebody. So at first, I couldn't forgive him at all. The only way I could go to sleep was that I overcame him. I killed him night after night in my thoughts and my dreams. And then eventually I chased him away. And then finally I came to a place where I could forgive truly and say I let it go. And I finally knew I'd really come to a place of forgiveness when I prayed for his soul one day, that he might be saved, you know. And that's when I knew I'd come to a place of really letting go and really forgiving. But as Father John teaches, would I let it go? Could I let it go? Letting go is part of forgiveness. When would I let it go? And he always says at our retreats to the people in the audience, it's okay to say I'm not ready yet. Could I let it go? Well, not when, not now. I'm not ready yet. And we have to be honest with ourselves. When are we ready to let this hurt go? So unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. You've heard that analogy a lot. It's really true. It was true for me. And it seemed like in the stages that I was able to forgive were the stages where I was healed, able to be healed at a deeper and a deeper and a deeper level. Once in my life, I would read about well-being and think, I have no idea what that word means. Being complete, whole, entire, wholeness, healed. What does that really mean? But there came a day where I thought, I feel like I am whole. I feel like God has put me back together again. And I realized we can all be whole, and he wants to put us all back together again. But sometimes it's the simple little things, the tiny little offenses, seem the hardest to forgive, the hardest to let go of. How could somebody, in the store treat me like that? They're having a bad day, probably. Maybe something horrible just happened to them. Who knows? We have to let go of all of it, right? The little things, the big things, and in that is our healing. And that's what we're heading toward this Lenten season, resurrection in our lives. Putting that nail in the coffin of the past, but draining it. Emotion, I love the title of this one book, and I forget the author. Emotions buried alive, or emotions that we never let go of are buried alive, but we never, I can't remember the exact title, but we never get rid of them. They're buried alive, they're still there. And it's only the purging and truly letting go of it that's going to cleanse that. So I just have a few questions to close with. Is there anybody you need to forgive? Is there anybody in your life that you would like to or should write a letter of forgiveness to? I wrote a letter of forgiveness to my mother, and she'd long been gone, but I wrote it for me. I wrote a letter of forgiveness to my dad and mailed it to him when he was alive. And he called me, and all he did was cry. And 30 days later, he died. We never know. And I think, Chad, you had asked a question a couple weeks ago. Does anything happen ever for the person that we forgive that they may not know that we're forgiving them? I've heard many stories. People who say, wow, I forgave that person and they got free of something. Or their life changed in some way. We just never know what's going to happen and what God is going to do as we're obedient to what He's called us to. So is there any area in your life where you feel like you are a captive of something? An obsession, an addiction, a fear, a health condition, anything? He came to set the captives free. That's the part of Isaiah 61 that I love so much. He came to set the captives free. Are you tormented in any area of your life? Even at night, bad dreams, can't sleep, whatever. Came to set the captive free. So where do you need healing? I just leave you with that question. And with my story, without a doubt, Jesus is our healer.
Can they ask you a few questions?
Yes.
Not enough.
Yep. Any questions now? Because this is...
Comments.
Or comments. Or stories, as long as it's not as long as mine. Right? Yeah, that's the end of my presentation.
I have one comment. You said it takes time to forgive. And, the Lord knows that we come from a different nature than His. And it takes time for us to grow spiritually.
Yes.
That's why He says, keep on asking, keep on seeking, keep on knocking. Because it's over. Like we can say we forgive somebody, but like you said, we don't feel it.
Right.
And we continually have to keep working towards that.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. It's a journey. Well, I love what Orthodoxy teaches. We are saved, we are being saved, and we shall be saved. And that's the journey. Mm-hmm. Okay. The end. And the end.
Thank you. Wonderful. Do you mind if I post that, or do you want me?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh yeah, my story's been posted many times. But at the end of the story, you can't even see scars on my hand, which is such an and knuckles totally reformed. I forgot to tell you that they came back together out of powder and bone.